And is this the right movement or the right measures to take? Because sanctions, like we saw during the in the Ukraine-Russia war, with all the sanctions, we actually thought that the war will not last this long. But yet with all the sanctions, the war is still on. And then how much will this affect the people and also President Bazoum? Some people are even worrying that if anything happens to him, it looks like when they sneeze, Nigeria might catch a flu.
Well, the sanctions are in order. You have to sanction them. The safety of the president of Nigeria, yes, you might, worried. His life is in the hands of these people, and they better keep him safe. But if anything happens to the contrary, they will have to answer for it.
Let's begin this conversation taking a quote from Eduardo Galeno, who is an Algerian journalist, writer, and novelist. He once said, "Most of wars or military coups or invasions are done in the name of democracy against democracy." Okay, we'll take our next one, and this one is from Vladimir Putin, who is Russian politician and former intelligence officer serving as the current president of Russia. Once said, "Respecting the sovereignty means preventing coups, unconstitutional actions, and illegitimate overthrowing of the legitimate government. All these things should be totally prevented." Sure, a lot of people will say coming from Vladimir Putin himself. Really? Really? All right, we'll take our next one, and this one is from Ahmed Ben Bella, an Algerian politician, soldier, and socialist revolutionary. He once said, "Everywhere that the struggle for national freedom has triumphed, once the authorities agreed, there were military coups d'etat that overthrew their leaders. That is the result time and time again." Okay, let's see how this goes relate to what we will be discussing this Tuesday evening. Very warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We're reaching you from Kaftan's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabelle Oji. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has appointed Jim Obazi as special investigator to probe the activities of the Central Bank of Nigeria and other related entities. In a letter dated 28 July, Mr. Tinubu said the appointment of Mr. Obazi, relying on the fundamental objectives set forth in Section 15, subsection 5 of the Nigerian Constitution, was in furtherance of his administration's anti-corruption fight. The appointment is with immediate effect, and Mr. Obazi is to report directly to the President. According to the letter signed by the President, the full terms of Mr. Obazi's engagement as a special investigator will be communicated to him in due course. Mr. Obazi was the Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, FRCN, before he was fired in 2017. Now, you recall also the DSS or the SSS is prosecuting the suspended Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele for possession of an unregistered firearm, and the Federal High Court in Abuja granted him bail last week. Now, on the foreign scene, Niger's ousted president has been seen for the first time since the military detained him in a coup last week. Mohamed Bazoum met Chad's leader Mohamed Idris Deby Itno in Niger's capital, Niamey. Mr. Deby, who also met the coup leaders, is spearheading mediation efforts after West African leaders gave Niger's military 7 days to give up power. The junta accused the ousted government of authorizing France to carry out an attack to try to free Mr. Bazoum. Now you have General Abdulrahman Tishani, who is the head of the Presidential Guards Unit, declared himself Niger's new ruler on Friday. Mr. Deby said his mediation effort was aimed at finding a lasting or peaceful solution to the crisis which is shaking Niger, which borders Chad. Mr. Deby was himself put in power by the army after his father was killed fighting rebel forces in 2021. He was sent to Niger by leaders of the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS. On Sunday, they gave the junta a week to reinstate the elected president who has been confined to the presidential palace in Niamey. The statement reads, and quote, "The regional bloc would take all measures necessary to restore constitutional order. If its demands were not met, such measures may include the use of force." The junta has not commented on the demands, but it has vowed to defend Niger from any aggression by regional or Western powers. It has also accused former colonial power France of planning military intervention. Now, on Monday, Colonel Amado Abdulrahman, one of the coup leaders, said that the toppled government had authorized France, Niger's former colonial power, to attack the presidential palace just to free Mr. Bazoum. Now, these and many more tops our discussion or our conversation for tonight. And I've got two guests, but we'll start with Comrade Obande Gideon Obande, President of Chetohaki Doma Youth Wing in Benue State. He's joining us here in the studio. And then later we'll be talking to Kola Alapinni, international human rights lawyer, as he joined us virtually from Los Angeles, USA. Ladies and gentlemen, grab a cup of water or your freshly made juice and let's have this conversation. But I will see you after this time out. Do join us again. Welcome back. Now we'll take this conversation straight to Kola Alapinni, international human rights lawyer, who joins us virtually from Los Angeles. It's great to have you on the show again today, Kola.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise.
Hanging out with you.
All right, so quite a number of items we need to talk about, and let's see how we can manage the next 30 minutes. But now let's start with the report of Lagos, coming from Lagos State, saying that they would they earmarked the sum of 61 million naira to bury 103 and #EndSARS victims. And I know that during that EndSARS protest, you had a very loud voice around it, and then recall how much they said no one's life was lost, and then if anybody died during that protest, nobody has come to claim their family, or no family has come to claim a cop, or in that regard. So now you come back almost 3 years later, and they're earmarking that huge sum amount of money to bury these victims. What are your thoughts when you first heard that that report, and then secondly, looking at it in the eyes of the law and international human rights and all? What exactly can you tell us? Because people will tell you that what if in the next 5-10 years people come back and say that my family member was missing, so what happened?
Well, I think the Lagos State government is still being economical with the truth. They need to come out clean. And so far, we can see that the truth is catching up with them. The denials over the years, eventually can no longer hold water, because it means that the morgues are full, the corpses are in the morgue. They need to be given a decent burial, because every day people die in Lagos. Lagos State is a huge metropolis. So you need to get rid of the bodies being held. And you can't get rid of them secretly without people knowing, or without a scandal blowing. And that's why the government have been pushed to the wall. I know that the Lagos State government has a forensic lab. They can try to ask people to come forward, people who have lost persons, especially during the time of the EndSARS, to come and submit their DNA profiles, and let's see how we can match with the corpse which they have with them. Oh, I know they might also be reluctant to do that. That is going to be an unassailable evidence that people were murdered during EndSARS. And it will also open up litigation, open up an avenue for suing the government. Regarding the amount of money being used to being earmarked to bury the corpse, so I'm not surprised, because anything in government will always have phantom figures. So we have ended up again padding the burial costs of of people we lost in controversial circumstances. It goes back to my first point, which I said government needs to be sincere. We've been hearing of padding of budgets, padding of expenses. Everything the government wants to do seems to cost 3 or 4 or 5 times more, maybe even 20 times more than what's the cost an ordinary individual. And you also have instances where, for instance, the metro line in Lagos State costs much more than a similar line costed in Ethiopia or something. So government is insincere, government is corrupt. It's shameful that all these fingers are still pointing at us. Nothing has been learned moving forward. Regarding the implication of this in international human rights law, the government will always, it opens up the government to liability and litigation, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to hush it up, but it will never go away except the proper thing is done. It will never go away. You can't. They're trying to wish it away. Something has happened. You've tried drastically to cover it up. First, they said there were no shootings. Pictures of the shootings came out. They said people didn't die. Whoever died, whoever has lost people should come out. Of course, families were afraid because they thought they were going to be arrested or they were going to be disappeared themselves. Now we have this instance of 103 people, 103 corpses on our hands, and we have to deal with it. So the panel, the inquiry that was held, where the coroner said there were various bodies brought to the morgue from various parts of Lagos State, is not far from the truth then.
All right, because you talked about corruption and corrupt leaders, and according to you, you said the government is corrupt. Now, let's talk about the show of shame. Let's call the name exactly how it is. What happened during in court with Emefiele versus the DSS and then the Nigeria Security Correctional Service. Even though the court has given an order asking that he should be remanded in prisons until he meets his bail conditions, but then you saw how the DSS was able to whisk him away, and then just few hours later we get the appointment reports on that saying that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has appointed Obazi, that's Jim Obazi, who was the Chief Executive Officer of Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, FRCN, to be the chief investigator on all that happened during when Godwin Emefiele was the CBN governor, and then other activities that he carried out and other offices. Now, what are your thoughts in that regard? A lot of people would say that that particular office or that investigative office, that's the FRCN, are they trying to give more relevance to that office than the anti-graft agencies that are already constitutionally built to carry out these activities?
Well, he who goes to equity must go with clean hands. The antecedents of the State Security Service, the SSS, is reminiscent of what used to happen during the military years. The first thing the military does when they come in, as you can see what's happening in the Niger Republic, is that they suspend the constitution. The country is more or less under martial law. They suspend the constitution because they don't want to submit themselves to the rule of law, and they don't want to be accountable to the third arm of government, which is the legislature. In any case, they will have to suspend the constitution for them to be able to rule, because the constitution does not allow for military rule. So they have done what we normally call wuru to the answer to get to power. And we saw this time and time again during the military years, where Chief Gani Faroemi will be arrested, he will be granted bail, as soon as he steps out of the courtroom, he will be picked up by the SSS again. We thought all this had stopped with the advent of our nascent democracy in 1999. And the incumbent should know better, because Bola Tinubu himself, who has become president today, was a victim of this practice. He ran into exile, from the military, from the Abacha years. And they fought the military so hard to have the democracy, which we now are enjoying for about 2 decades now. So we would have thought that he being on the other side of the fence and now a beneficiary of the rule of law will respect the rule of law. But it appears that there's always something in Aso-rock, the presidential villa, that turns our leaders against us, no matter how much they've promised before they got there. And we saw this. Recall that the previous president used the SSS, who are only accountable to the president. They are like a secret police formed at the behest of the state. Just they are only answerable to the Nigerian president. And so he uses them. Any president that comes into power uses them at his or her own will. Apart from securing the state, there is an omnibus clause in the instrument that sets them up that says that they are to do any other assignments, any other thing as assigned to them by the president. So if the president wants them to turn up at your doorstep, he can order them. If the president wants them to hack into your phone, they can do so. They can do. If the president wants to know what you had yesterday in your kitchen, what meal you had, they can turn up at your door and barge into your kitchen to find out what you cooked yesterday and report to the president. That's how wide the powers that set them up can be. You saw it happen to Omoyele, where the SS invaded the sanctity of the court and they were wrestling him to the ground. Inside the courtroom, the judge had to recede into our chambers so that such contempt does not take place in face of the courts. And here we are again, the same thing going on. I'm not a great fan of the CBN governor. I think he was one of the most brazen, he was one of the most brazen CBN governors we ever had in the history of our country. When he was brought in to replace his predecessor, one of the first things that he did was to put back the bank charges when you withdraw from other banks' ATM. I thought that was very cruel, and selfish and self-centered. He came in to just, make more money for the private sector, the banks where he was coming from, his primary constituency. That was the very first policy he implemented. It was hitching to make money for them, and that set the tone of the kind of person he was, the kind of governor who he set out to be. If his predecessor had cancelled if you withdraw after 3 times, they charge you 35 naira or so, and you can withdraw from any bank's ATM. Why would someone else come in and just reverse it, and make, life more difficult for people? Secondly, he dared, as a CBN governor, who is supposed to be impartial, who is supposed to be apolitical, he dared to even descend into the murky waters of politics and want to be president of Nigeria. They were printing electoral materials in his name, branding vehicles. It was shocking, very shocking for such things to happen. And, the president condoned him when he ought to have been asked to leave or, disciplined, bringing the institution into disrepute. CBN governors are mostly seen, not heard, because of how powerful their voices ring in the international financial system. If your CBN governor says something and is interpreted wrongly, the markets tend to go haywire, and such positions are for temperate people,
All right.
hallowed people. The position of a CBN governor is almost like the position of a judge. He is a judge, actually, a judge in the financial system. He's supposed to be seen, not heard. Okay.
All right.
So when is the head of the regulatory system, because the CBN is the regulator in the financial system. So when the judge starts descending into the arena of conflict, we have a problem. You know, and look at his language. He grants a press interview and is saying, "Come and fight. I'm ready for you." How did we end up with an Agbero CBN governor? You know, those in a nutshell sum my assessment of the gentleman. However, having said all those, he should be allowed to have his day in court.
All right.
The rule of law should prevail. Not because we like him or we don't like him, we like his face or we don't like his face, what he did during the Naira change policy or whatever is debatable. Some people will say, yes, he did well because he blocked the issue of campaign spending where money will be exchanging hands, and it depends on the side of the divide which you are.
Okay, so if you're looking at sorry, I have to butt in there. So now if you're taking a cue from what you just said, depending on the side of the fence you're sitting at the moment, so some people will say that with all that is going on with the CBN governor and the federal government or the executives, it's looking more like a political vendetta. Do you see it as such?
I would say the rule of law should prevail. If the government has an issue with him, that's what the law courts are for. And if the government has an issue with him, I think the incumbent, that is the president, should be careful, because it could be interpreted as political vendetta, like what you're saying, because some of the policies of the CBN governor seemed to have affected him or affected his choice, and it will seem as if he's out to take his pound of flesh. And then, if you ask from the previous government, the president obviously liked what he did, because the president promised that he was going to give us credible elections. There was going to be less emphasis on money sharing, which was what the Emefiele set out to do. Also, if you look at policy, it could be argued that the Naira change was overdue, was long due, because we also have been changing our Naira. The policy to recall the currency and to change the currency ought to be done for X amount of years, which we had fallen back and we hadn't done it.
All right.
Or should we have rushed everything and done it when we did it? This is debatable, and that is why this man should have been allowed to have his day in court. He has constitutional protection. He has a right to counsel of his choice. He has a right to prepare for his defense, and he should be allowed to come to court and say these things in the open air. If the man has gone to court and say, okay, fine, because he was proactive, he went to court and said, you cannot arrest me, you cannot detain me, you cannot do so and so. He sued the government first and said, let's go and discuss this matter in court. And he got an order. There was a court order saying that, there's a substantive matter, all parties should come to court and discuss this. So I would have even thought that when the SSS went to court again to try to charge him and get an order, the court should have refused to listen to them, because that would have been contempt of court. What the judge, recently, a few days ago, we learned that the SSS went to court again to try to get an order, and the court refused them because it was an abuse of court process and it was contemptuous. That is what should have happened when they went for the bail application. The court should have refused to listen to the SSS outrightly, because this was in breach of an initial order which said that the Emefiele should not have been arrested. All parties should have come to court.
All right, let's quickly move straight to other conversations. We have quite a number of things to discuss, but then let's see how we can manage the few minutes that we have. You talked about the Niger Republic coup that's ongoing at the moment. Now, if we have to talk about go straight to the foreign scene and talk about Niger Republic and this coup. How exactly did the news about the coup happening in Niger Republic come to you? Did you actually expect it? All that is happening, with starting from the election and then the swearing in of the president, that's President Bazoum, and all that is happening, and then if you have to go back to what the resolutions made by ECOWAS committee, where the commission, where they talked about, they gave sanctions, and then I'll read some of the quotes made by the president of ECOWAS, where he, that's Omar Toure, who said, and quote, "In the event that the authorities' demands are not made by the commission and are not met in 1 week, the security officials and chief of defense staff of ECOWAS should take all measures to restore constitutional order in Niger Republic, which may include use of force." He also ordered for the closure of land and air borders between ECOWAS countries and Niger Republic, suspension of all transactions between ECOWAS member states and Niger, freezing of all transactions, including energy transaction with Niger, travel ban and asset freeze for the military officials involved in the coup attempts. Now, what are your thoughts in regards to all of this? How much has sanctions or these restrictions even done, if you have to look starting from all that is happening with the Russia-Ukraine attack?
Okay, I think it's right now anymore. The rule of law should always prevail. Constitutional law always prevail. And the ECOWAS should have acted more swiftly, because this that happened in Mauritania, it happened in Mali, it happened in Burkina Faso, kept on creeping across the Sahel till it got to Niger Republic, who are our northern neighbors. We share the largest and longest land border with Niger Republic. So the ECOWAS and the AU should have been more proactive and taking punitive steps against all those other countries which I had mentioned before it got to Niger. Why didn't they take these steps initially? Because all the countries which I had mentioned are former French colonies, and France has an economic and defense pact with their former colonies. So, for instance, the French central bank keeps their gold reserves and prints their francs and everything. These countries are not independent economically. Everything is tied to the mothership, which is in France. Also, if any of these countries are invaded or attacked by another country, because of the defense pact, Franco defense pact, which they have signed, the French are obliged to respond and protect their former colonies. Be that as it may, now that it has come close to our doors, next door, literally next door, it means that, it portends danger for the man in Aso-rock, because it would appear as if Niger Republic gets away with it, the man in Aso-rock will be thinking, oh, could my soldiers be tempted as well to want to do this and get away with it if nothing is done with Niger? And it's a purely Niccolo Machiavellian move, which is important for the survival of the prince, for Nigeria to, come up with spearheading these and robustly using the mechanism of ECOWAS and the AU to try to, ward off the spread of this cancer. Did I answer your question?
Because I'm actually wondering how, because you talked about how it will affect the man in Aso-rock, a lot of people are wondering how this would affect Nigeria, since you said it's like the next door neighbor, looking at the fact that Niger stands as a buffer in the Lake Chad between the warring Libya and then the incursion of jihadi movements and all. I'm just wondering, do Nigerians have reasons to worry? That's one on the side. Two questions, and I'd like you to take them in one breath. Now, that's one on the side. And then secondly, I'm trying to find the right word. Worried about the fact that is this the right movement or the right measures to take? Because sanctions, like we saw during the in the Ukraine-Russia war. With all the sanctions, we actually thought that the war will not last this long. But yet with all the sanctions, the war is still on. And then how much will this affect the people and also President Bazoum? Some people are even worrying that if anything happens to him, it looks like when they sneeze, Nigeria might catch a flu.
Well, the sanctions are in order. You have to sanction them because this is like a child who has gone rogue. And if you don't do anything, it emboldens the child, and gradually the anarchy sets up in the house because other children are looking at this child who has gone rogue, and the parents are not doing anything. Eventually, when that child gets into trouble, the whole house is going to be put into trouble. If he gets into trouble and the government, comes for him, is prosecuted, is slammed in prison, it has, the effects on the whole household, psychological, the home is never the same again, and the parents, bear the brunt, the other siblings bear the brunt. There's also a societal impact. The sanctions are in order. They are the first steps to take, and they will hit very hard at the people who have staged this coup, because there's a travel ban on them and their families. Well, the international community is also cutting off, trade and everything with them. So the sanctions will bite deep. The safety of the president of Nigeria, yes, we might, worried. His life is in the hands of these people, and they better keep him safe. But if anything happens to the contrary, they will have to answer for it. And also, the president cannot be seen to be weak and just surrender to the whims and caprices of the coup plotters. They are the ones who have everything to fear. So the man must not die in their hands, or anything untoward cannot happen to him, because it also means they are not safe. So they will be keeping him as a pawn to safety. They cannot execute him. They cannot touch him. If he is alive, then the chances of them being alive too would be greater.
All right.
What are the implications here? Well, we hope that there is a peaceful resolution. The best case scenario would be for the coup plotters to negotiate their way to safety, and say, okay, this is the time to go to the negotiating table now. If we revert to the status quo, we must not be tried. This must not happen, that must not happen. But let's see how long they're going to be holding on and calling the bluff of the international community. It's not very easy to call the bluff of the international community. We saw it during the Abacha years, where Nigeria was turned into a pariah nation. Chief Obasanjo had to literally go around the world and say, hey, the dictatorship is gone, we're back for business. And then the whole world embraced us again, and we had our debts cancelled and this. But these sanctions are going to hit Nigeria very hard. It's a largely impoverished country, and it is landlocked. They depend on Nigeria for a lot of stuff. The previous government precedent, because of his paternal ties to Nigeria, was trying to open them up towards the southern border with Nigeria, with a train service to Maradi, which is where his father comes from originally. So they don't have any access to the seaports. They're landlocked. The only thing we can say that has caught the interest of the Western powers would be, their mineral deposits. They have a huge deposit of uranium, which is used for nuclear power and powering the stations in Europe. France has a vested interest there, So also when you look at the security implications, either, when you're talking about Boko Haram or the incidences in the Sahel or the breakdown of law and order in Libya and the proliferation of small arms that, came southwards towards us. You look at all these security implications. Yes, it gives cause for concern because we cannot afford for a breakdown of law and order in Nigeria like we had in Libya. The whole Sahel region is still reeling from the effects of removing Gaddafi in Libya. So I hope that these sanctions bite very hard, very quickly, and that the rule of law is restored in Nigeria. Because if it doesn't, and these soldiers get away with it, like they had gotten away with it in Mali, in Mauritania, and I think in Guinea as well. The commander-in-chief here may be thinking, okay, then we're not safe, because it means that the soldiers can do the same around him, and there will be no sanctions. I think that would be his major worry. His primary worry would be, we need to resolve this so that we don't send the wrong message to our armed forces and think they can get away with it.
All right, so even as we begin to round up, if you can help us, 2 questions I'd like to ask you, and I'd like you to take them in one breath. Now, you mentioned some countries that I know during when I was doing the research, I saw that these countries still have military. They're still led by the military regime, like the Guinea you talked about, Mali, Niger, Mauritania, and all. Now, if you have people, especially from Nigeria, I recall you said something about General Sani Abacha, God bless his soul. I recall you talked about him, and I remember all that happened after when he died. What happened at that time? Because at least I encountered it. So you have people from Nigeria, from this part of the world, or from even Africa, some part of Africa, saying that they want a coup, or if you try to displace a particular administration or government, that they are going to bring down anarchy. And I keep wondering, did they ever see what coup means? If they never saw, maybe they should start with Niger Republic or read about what coup means. So why exactly do you have people talk about coup, even seeing what these countries go through? That's one on the side. And then secondly, you have people who say that there are kind of international interests that has infiltrated this Niger Republic coup d'etat. Do you agree with that? There are instigations about military interest in it, probably from Russia and all.
Oh, your first question, so answer it. Whenever people are disgruntled with their governments, or where you have the electorate who feel shortchanged, or who feel that there were no credible elections, the person who they would rather see at the helms of affairs is not there. Well, such people would always welcome military intervention because they are disgruntled. I remember when the coup that brought in Major General Muhammadu Buhari in 1983, 31st of December 1983, it was announced by General Sani Abacha. And, we were all on the streets, dancing and jumping up. I was just about 10 years old, getting ready to go into, government college back then. We're so very happy because we could, even though we were kids, we were hearing about corruption in government, in the NPN government. This same profligacy that we keep complaining in the National Assembly was the same thing that people were complaining then. About the Shehu Shagari government. And also when the military came in, I was, let the poor breathe. It was that kind of, thank God, finally they can. And, we didn't see, the military came in with all sorts of promises. How they were, our clinics, our hospitals have been turned into mere consulting clinics. There are no drugs, nothing changes. Every military government that comes in, nothing changes. There was another coup again, I think was announced by the Brigadier Dogo. Nothing changes. They just come in, they speak all this big grammar, which speech that has been drafted for them. It has been shown that the worst civilian government is probably better than the best military government. So the military have no place in civilian rule, in polity. If you want to contest, take off your uniform, hang your beret and boots, go and buy the forms and pick up the forms and contest.
All right. We'd like you to quickly touch on the other question, because our time is fast spent.
Yeah, the international dimension. Yeah, because what we're seeing is the rise of non-state actors like the Wagner Group, which Russia had always vehemently denied it. Now they can deny it no more. We have non-state actors, private army, mercenaries all coming in to prop up these governments, and in exchange for the rich mineral deposits. So that's the attraction. The government allows them to take away, diamond, uranium, this and that in exchange for their military services. And so it's like when a wild animal like a lion or something smells blood, they will always go there. So it's inevitable. We need to stop this, because now Africa is now being turned into a playground for all these mercenaries and private army, private militia, to cause instability all over our region.
We just hope that it gets resolved very soon. Thank you so much, Kola Alapinni, international human rights lawyer. It's always a pleasure having these discussions with you.
Thank you very much. Hope to speak to you soon.
Great. All right. Even though our network connection was not networking, let me talk like the typical Nigerian, but then it was actually good having this discussion. Thank you so much, Nigerians. It's been a wonderful time having this discussion. First, we chatted with Obande Gideon Obande, who is president of Chetohaki Doma Youth Wing, and then now we also had this discussion with Kola Alapinni, international human rights lawyer. And it's been a wonderful time here on The Conversation. How time flies when you're discussing serious matters that concerns our very own country, Nigeria, and maybe our neighboring countries. I will see you next time. Keep watching The Conversation, because you never know who my next guest will be or what I will be discussing of next. Till I come your way again from the nation's capital, Abuja, I am Annabelle Oji. God bless you and yours, and God bless Nigeria.